Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Let me apologize for the past couple of weeks. I'm sorry this is getting too often. I really must stop having to apologize. Tonight we want to discuss poverty and its implications, its consequences, and possibly its causes. I am speaking this evening with two leaders of smaller political parties, and I will be putting to them whether in fact part of the poverty we as a people endure is because of some of the misguided political and economic policies which we may have pursued in the past. So let me welcome our guests, Mr. Gerald Perreira, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
And and Mr. Craig Sylvester, who are, as I said, political leaders. But I want to ask them, do you think it's the wrong political and economic policies we have pursued that have led us to this current situation?
Definitely.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Now, statistics are hard to come by in Guyana. And we don't have, I know lots of countries you would find statistics on income, statistics on wealth, and then you'll hear about the haves and the have-nots. In Guyana, we don't have, unfortunately, such statistics. And you know, there's a saying: if you don't know what the illness is,
correct,
how can you cure it?
Yeah.
Do we have poverty of any great degree in our country? From what we're talking about, empirical and anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
As I said, we don't have statistics. What would you say?
Yeah, well, Chris, I think you just now you were discussing the issue of poverty here, and you said that you yourself observed that you notice evidence of poverty even in your own organization, and I think that in itself lends to the idea that Guyanese generally have to face, and this is within the population, okay, across the workforce, right, and across all communities, okay. What we are observing, right, is a state where, as I put it, there is an insufficiency on the part of workers and households in general to satisfy their basic needs and wants. Okay, and this translates into poverty, right? Whether it's in the inability to buy enough food or provide enough for your children, send them to schools, all right, provide them with adequate schooling, right? One of the problems with Guyana as it relates to poverty is education, right? Education is not really as one of the criterions of poverty, so to speak, but the lack of education does in fact promote, right, or see a repeat in the cycle of poverty, because education is crucial to transforming human beings into employable adults. And when we have a situation where there's a lack of education, right, or insufficiency of education within the public school system at the very least, right, what we see is this translating into adults who are really below a standard or an employable standard, right? And within the context of the high degree of unemployment and the lack of investment which creates employment, what we have really is a mass of individuals, workers and people who are just struggling, shall we say, day to day, right, with insufficiency, all right? Poverty is an extreme case of of inadequacy. Right?
Gerald?
Well, first of all, let's attempt a definition. What constitutes poverty? I mean, people are poor, people are in poverty when they cannot meet their basic needs, such
Now,
as...
let me ask you, I'm not cutting you, but do you think with the minimum wage we have, is conceivably a living wage?
No, it's ridiculous. Why should a country...
The equivalent of about $1.25.
Yes, that's right. Why should a country like Guyana, with less than 1 million people, tremendous natural resources, why this grinding poverty in so many areas? And it's precisely because of the existing economic arrangement or the economic model that this country runs with. Nobody can deny, unless you just, for the sake of arguing, you just want to argue. For the past 35 years, in every country where the neoliberal model has been implemented, the gap between the have and the have-nots have widened. Today we talk about the 1% versus the 99%. In the 1960s, New Zealand was considered the early 60s one of the wealthiest, probably the wealthiest country. And that was under the Labour Party that pursued social democratic policies. Education was free from nursery right up to university. And when the National Party came into power and implemented neoliberal model, it widened the gap between the have and the have-nots. And today in New Zealand, out of every 6 households, children and so, you have like 3 to 4, yes, the gap in poverty, especially from those who coming from the Pacific countries of Vanuatu, the Samoans, and so on. Why I mention New Zealand is because these countries are considered what they call developed countries, right? But yet, in a country like that with 4-point-something million people, 2 New Zealanders, the wealth of 2 persons is equivalent to the combined wealth of 1.5 million persons. And this is what it has done because...
Well, let me talk about Ghana. Let's talk
Yes,
about
yes,
Ghana.
I'm just giving an example.
Because I want to ask you this. We have, in theory, we have something of a welfare state. If you looked at our 1980 Constitution,
yes,
it land to the tiller, free education up to nursery,
but you spend at
leisure and all of those things. What went wrong? Because you can still go, unlike the US. You get ill, you can go to a public medical facility. And nobody asks you question. They don't ask you for an insurance card. Your child goes into school, although we talk about education. Housing is a challenge. Transportation is a challenge. We do have lots of challenges here. But the framework was intended to be, with the national insurance scheme, something of a welfare type of state. Where did we go wrong?
Well, the public hospital, I mean, it's there. It says that you can go and get medical. But what type of medical attention? You go to the public hospital, someone who needs a nebulizer, for example, right? For the people who are asthma cases. And sometimes you go there, you sit, you have to wait. You have to wait because the nebulizer is not working, or 5 or 6 persons are waiting on the nebulizer. So that's not the type of healthcare system that we're looking forward to. Burnham did not have the resources, the money that these governments, these and those before him had. But yet we didn't pay for water, right? It was it was far better, despite certain the problems we had and all of that. We weren't paying for water, but the water that was coming through the tap was clean, right? It was better. It was better then at the Georgetown Hospital than now.
I wonder if you're picturing an over rosy situation.
No, I'm not.
Hold on.
I'm not.
Hold on. We did have basic shortages of everything.
Yeah.
Including things in the hospital. Let's not pretend. We didn't have exercise books unless it was given by the state. So it was challenging. But as you said, the resources were scarce.
Yeah.
Except we did misuse resources.
Yeah.
The Upper Mazaruni Development Project, you know.
Yep. These are. Yep. mistakes that were made of, yeah.
So, what model of welfare state? Because we say, if you look at your constitution, if you look at how it was set up, it was supposed to be.
That's right.
Because it essentially came off the UK pattern,
Mm-hmm.
which has the welfare state. Where did we go wrong?
Well, if I may, I'll allow a word here. We went wrong, right, with the policies in Barnum's or during Barnum's years, right? Those policies, which were the socialist policies, and not only that, not only his socialist policies, his cooperative socialism policies, but also his politics, in which our society was degraded as a result of the rigged elections, right? Our society became ultimately unstable, and it became economically ungovernable because the PPP at that time, right, systematically sought to undermine the economic power or the economic system of the country. And in doing so, right, this along with everything else that went on, including high oil prices, caused our economy to fall back, right? We systematically became unable to pay for our imports, right? This led us into a situation where we had to seek funding or financing from the IMF and international institutions. Under Barnum, right, Barnum really had little of an attitude where, as it related to borrowing from the IMF because of their requirements on his government as it relates to policy. He was not too inclined to bow to their policies. So what
But are you suggesting that he should have?
Well, as a matter of fact, ultimately the country under Desmond Hoyt, after his death in 1989, had to accede to the restructuring that was recommended
But
by...
I want to take you up on Barnum's policies. What are your criticisms of a policy? Forget Barnum. What are your criticisms of a policy that says a country must try to feed, clothe, and house itself?
Don't get me wrong, Chris, right? And I don't want our viewers to recognize this. I have no problem, so to speak, with the policies which Barnum adumbrated and he advocated for us, right? The problem really lay, okay, not with his policies, but with the politics that he engineered in our country, right? The politics of rigging, right, and suppressing the majority, right, which clearly was not his, right, was the politics which ultimately destroyed the welfare of this country. Because had it been Barnum on the PPP side, I am sure that Barnum would probably have done the same thing that the PPP did. All right?
Your view
Well,
of
I
the
don't
feed,
agree.
clothe, and house.
No, the feed, clothe, and house was based on the whole thing of self-reliance. Because one of the things that Barnum understood was that your political independence was meaningless if you didn't have economic independence. And the way forward for countries like Guyana was called Third World, or today we refer to as the Global South, is they make the concept of self-reliance a reality, rather than going to the IMF and World Bank and all of those, and countries have pursued that. Now, the thing that I always find interesting is the attack on the attack on socialist policies. So if you get problems in Guyana, it's because of the failure of socialism, but nobody says in capitalist societies or countries that have pursued capitalist policies for years, right, where you have a lot of unemployment, a lot of poverty, nobody turns and say, well, unless you're opposed to capitalism, that capitalism has failed, right? But, you know, I mean, look at, when comparatively speaking, look at where you have the 1%, those who control the wealth of most countries. And so then you look at the grinding poverty in a lot of those countries, even in Britain, the poverty has increased, right? It has, all across. Now, getting back to Guyana, nobody can deny. I mean, on the Barnum, I could remember when you pull up to the traffic light and so you didn't have people running up begging and all of that. The problem started in this country, the increase in poverty and all of that.
I'm trying to remember these traffic lights.
Yeah.
I can't recall. We didn't have too many. We didn't have too many then.
No, but I mean, when you pull up to
At the junctions.
you didn't have the
Yes.
what you're saying now. But the neoliberal model, right, with privatization and the sellout of state resources and all that, and Mr. Greenwich was an architect part of that when he was finance minister. Right? That started with Mr. Hoyt, and when Chedi Jagan got in, right down to Ramatar, Jagdeo, right down to Mr.
They've
Granger.
all pursued the same
They've all
policies.
pursuing the same policies.
No, well, Chris, what I don't want to do, right, is to get into. I am aware of Gerald's suasions as it relates to economics and what defines or the best system for governing a country.
So what's yours? He's critical of
Yeah, he's critical of the neoliberalism or
are
slash
you
capitalism.
in favor of it?
Well, I'll be quite frank. I am in favor of capitalism, and I am of the belief that we cannot go forward without capitalism.
Capitalism
Without capitalism supported by sound policies which are geared towards ensuring that people do not slip into or slip into
how does
poverty.
capitalism is the market forces.
Capitalism is a market forces, but there
essentially say if you can buy it, you can get it.
yeah, but you see, capitalism in itself, right, is bad, right? What there needs to be is a balance or a regulation of the market activity, where consumers are not plundered and where workers are ensured adequate compensation, and where there is a level of growth that actually supports continuous increase in employment, which creates well-paying jobs, which eliminates the issue of poverty. What we need is a properly functioning and managed economic system, right?
That's what we're trying to get.
Driven by industry, research, and investment. The government, it has been shown that governments are incapable of adequately delivering for all the needs and wants of a society. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt. So what really, or I should say that the capitalist model is more efficient at allocating resources that generate the variety of products, okay, which satisfy the needs and wants
that's almost the law of the jungle. Capitalism, in its naked sense, is the law of the jungle, the survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
How do you
and this is what I'm
but you
saying.
know that people are not endowed with the same kind of qualities. How do you cater? Who
Chris,
gets what?
Chris, I think you're underselling human beings, right? You're underselling human
think
beings
so.
to a very large
Let me
extent.
hear you.
Because I'll say this. You give the average man a proper education, right? Let him know the game that he's about to play.
Mm-hmm.
And believe you me, right? That average man will deliver on ensuring that his family gets gets his quota or the family's quota.
So you're saying all
needs
these
and wants.
economies that have failed and have the kind of problems, the 1%,
Yeah.
and we're probably worse than 1%. If you try to do some statistics, of course you have to think the state is one of the biggest owner of wealth, of assets in this country. The state is also one of the biggest income earners in the form of taxation.
No, well, when you talk about wealth, right? We don't include the state.
But why not?
We're talking about private.
Why
wealth.
not?
No,
You have a national cake, partner.
No. But what I'm trying to tell you is that when you're talking about the distribution of wealth, right? We're talking about the distribution of wealth among private citizens, right?
Why are you restricting it?
No, well, you see, because you got to recognize, Chris, right, that while it might be true that government is in control of a large amount of wealth or resources in Guyana, right? The fact is, right, that the taxes that are earned by them really belong, right? They are just managing those resources which belong to the people of Guyana. So it's not that money is their money per se. They are supposed to be using that money to listen to me, to deliver on the social needs and social services and all the needs and wants
that's
cannot,
true.
That cannot
that's
be
true.
provided by the private sector, including roads, education, right, health services, you name it, whatever it is that the private sector cannot provide adequately, government is mandating.
Your model is the private sector must operate, the government, the state must facilitate it, security and everything.
Precisely.
And this, it must earn its revenue, it must earn turnover, profits, and the state must then find all the costs of training those workers, of looking after their health care, of dealing with their senior age and so on.
This is what we're paying taxes for, you know. This is what we're paying tax. We are not paying taxes to government for government to do whatever it is they feel like. Government has a responsibility, right? That is part of education and health, right? It's part of the responsibility of government. Now, in America,
you don't think employers have an obligation
to educate their children?
No. I'm not talking about
that
children.
This is the problem with this is the problem with economies in general. There are some goods which are not supplied in adequate enough quantities by the private sector. Education, health, for example. In other words, if those goods were provided by the private sector and priced by the private sector, there would be many citizens in Guyana, not only in Guyana, but even in America as it is now, right, who would be unable to afford the quality of care needed to support them. Therefore, it is necessary for government to step in to provide those services that cannot be afforded by the population which cannot.
Gerald, you're gone quiet.
No, but I was allowing him to finish. Right. I like to say,
so that is really
just make
model,
a few
right?
points.
Just let me wrap up. That is my idea. You have capitalism at work, right? You have government supporting and regulating the industry, right? You also have government providing services, right, which cannot be provided.
I know you can ask me.
Tell me
which country socialism has worked, but tell me which country capitalism without serious restrictions and regulation.
No. I will never advocate for capitalism without regulation. I will never do that, because capitalism without regulation will impoverish the masses.
But first of all, there's some points I want to make clear. Capitalism might be good at efficiency, but when it comes to allocating resources and the so-called free market, when it's left the mechanisms, when it's left itself, doesn't regulate the resources properly, allocate resources properly.
That is my case.
Good. Secondly, you must understand the basis of capitalist development, as Walter Rodney pointed out in How Europe Underdeveloped Africa and Capitalism and Slavery. The capitalism, and I want to make this point clear, capitalism is not synonymous with all forms of private ownership, right? Because there were forms of private ownership that predated capitalism. Okay? So I am not one of those people who are going to stand up because I'm taking a position against capitalism that I'm defending the command economy. No. Right? I'm no Marxist, I'm no communist, and I saw the weaknesses of the command economy. But I'm talking about a democratic socialist policy that I've seen that even people like Bernie Sanders advance now in the States, and millions congresswomen, and the number of congresswomen have been elected on that ticket because the capitalist model is concentrating. It has failed. No, just hear me. Right? Secondly, we hear a lot about the private sector and the private sector. Of course, there's a role for the private sector, but I want anyone who study economic history to show me which country in the world private sector build. Private sector is not in the business of building country. Private sector is there to build their own businesses and for profits, for capitalism the primary thing that drives it is the profit motive, right? So how do you do that? You keep wages down. And they need that reserve army of labor, as Marx rightly pointed out, right? So what you have now, look at what they did. They've broken the backs of the trade unions. There is no more collective bargaining. You have contracts, and you have what is called work is no longer permanent, right? We have the casualization of labor. So you can go to work tomorrow, and then next week you lose your job, right? And what you have is a huge reserve of workers, army of labor, competing for jobs that are not there. You're seeing it.
No.
And yeah.
Let me put this. Now, even with those things, and You've got a tax system that keeps being relaxed in favor of the private sector.
Yes.
You have a labor regime that is being relaxed in favor of the private sector.
Yes.
You have a land allocation scheme that essentially has been relaxed in favor of the private sector. You talk about you don't deal with, you don't talk about state when you talk about wealth. Let me tell you something. If the state were to release sugar lands to those thousands of people,
Yes.
it has made homeless. It has made jobless. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah.
You have a say, so you have to take wealth in the global picture.
Of course.
It is as though there's a pie. There's a pie, and we share it. You share it between individuals, the corporate sector, the state, etc. The fact is, the tax system is working entirely in favor of corporate, isn't it? You have, in the days when you had the better system, tax rates were much higher, weren't they?
You know, Chris.
You know those days, don't you?
I think by straying away from how we became impoverished or how we came to poverty in Guyana, by straying away from that point, right? You're actually moving away from the answer to our problem, right? Because our problem.
So what's the answer?
Our problem is not really a skewed tax system which is in favor, as you were saying, right? But an inadequacy of basic incomes of workers across.
And who has to pay that?
No.
Who has to pay it?
And we didn't have poverty after when we were colony. We didn't have poverty.
No, you're making it look like these guys are some angels.
Both the government and the private sector. Now in Guyana, the private sector takes its triggers for wage increases from the government. Now what
Where
has
you get it from?
happened?
Where you get it from?
Oh no, well
Listen, let me tell you something, partner. Whenever you hear talk about raising the minimum wage,
Yeah.
the objection comes from the private sector.
Yep.
Let's not get
Correct.
this wrong.
And that's what I'm trying to tell you.
No, you said the other way. You said it the other way just now.
What I'm saying is that the
Keep
private
wages
sector.
down.
Let me make it clear. What I said is the private sector takes its mark right from
No,
government.
I'm saying
as it
no.
relates to
It
the
doesn't.
I'm saying no.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, Craig. It doesn't.
The basic point is this, right? If government makes an 8% increase, the private sector uses that as a gauge for increasing.
Let me
the
ask you
wage.
this.
I do not have any evidence of this, but my estimation of what goes on in the economy is that the private sector generally observes the wage increases of the public sector.
The point we're making is that they resist the changes. Now,
Yep.
let me ask you
I
this.
don't object to
Let me
that
ask you this.
precisely
Yeah.
because the private sector is not in favor of increases in wages. No, that's your point.
Yes.
Is that your point?
That's the point we made.
That's
And
what
I have
we're
no
saying.
problem
That's
with
what
that.
we're saying.
I have no problem
So how
with
do
that.
you deal with it?
But
How do you
see,
deal with
the
it?
problem?
How do you deal with it?
How do we deal with
Because as Gerald said just now,
I have the
part
answer
of
to
the
that,
problem is the government has done very little, and we're not
Chris,
talking about this government,
Chris,
Yeah.
the
to
problem-
help the labor movement.
Yeah.
The labor movement has
Chris,
destroyed
our
itself in
problem-
some
Chris,
ways.
our
Let's
problem-
face it.
You know, one of the reasons
It's
for
committed suicide.
You know, one of the reasons for these low wages that we have is because we have a high degree of underutilized resources entirely across this economy. My point is, had there been enough capital development and investment in this country, which would have created larger companies with higher increases, with large numbers of workers in them, right? And had there been consistent investment continually throughout the decades,
Who's stopping it?
exactly.
No, who's stopping
But
it?
you understand the point. You understand the point. The point is not where we are right now. The point is why we are where we are right now. And we are where we are right now because our governments have systematically through the decades not been promoting or advocating a mass investment by the private sector. What they have
How does the
been doing-
government do this, partner?
How does the government do this?
Yeah.
The government talks with the private sector, listens to its problems, creates or addresses the problems of the private sector. One of our biggest problems going back the decades is an issue of energy, which I'm sure you're aware of, Chris. Energy. Not only energy. Also, the government has been, at least under the PPP, have been consistently resistant to significant increases in the wages of the public servants. Okay? This has also impacted on the policy in the private sector. In addition, there is an attempt to undermine unionization of workers in the private sector, right? Today, there are many workers on Regent Street who still go to work and earn roughly $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a week.
Now
Okay?
that's the private sector.
And that's what I'm trying to tell you. So what we have there basically is this depressed wage rate because people can just turn over. They just have to accept what is given. My point is, if there had been enough investment which would have taken off all of these unemployed people in our system, right, we would have had a much bigger economy.
Tell me something.
And
You know,
precisely.
hold on. In what areas are these investments going to take place?
Let
And
me
what
tell you.
is keeping it back?
Chris, let me tell you where we have been failing all the time. The PPP has been failing in the agriculture sector forever. You know why? Because there are swathes and swathes of agricultural land which are underdeveloped up to
So the
today.
PPP must go and develop those lands?
No. The PPP should have been should have taken the initiative of working with those areas, recognizing the potential for those communities, those rural communities, to contribute in not only
But
in,
man,
both in
listen,
respect to
look, I
exports,
don't want to.
in respect to
Gerald is
exports,
taking
in
his
respect-
absence. But listen,
in
No,
respect-
I don't want to interject.
we've had lots of schemes. For example, the MMA, the Tapakova project and so on. We've had lots of schemes. It is up to the private sector to do it. What do you do? Must a political party go and do it?
What we have to recognize, Chris, is that our communities have now become really severely impoverished to the extent that they do not have the kind of capital to drive their own investment. What we need, and what my party is actually promoting, is the idea that we will make agriculture the bastion of the economy, whereby we will model our economy based on some of the activities that we have seen or have observed as in successful economies that have been engaged in successful agriculture. New Zealand and America, they together in 2016, I think exported more than $200 billion in export.
Yeah, but
now,
look
New
at the
Zealand, I think-
population size, partner.
no, not only the population, not only
No,
the population.
the
New Zealand,
thing is-
I think if I'm not mistaken, it's New Zealand. New Zealand is 1/20th the size of Guyana's size.
But
No,
If-
not at all.
in-
Not at all. Not at all.
One of the
New Zealand is not
No,
4,000
maybe.
square miles.
no.
No,
in
no,
looking at poverty, when we are going to address poverty, we must examine the existing social and economic arrangement. We must look at who owns the wealth of the country, how it is owned, and how it's distributed. These are the questions that must be.
Wealth and income.
Yeah, wealth and income. Exactly. I believe in what I call, you see, it's okay, well, number of countries went wrong. They nationalized what I call strategic sectors of the economy. Or what was
as
referred to-
Gordon said, the commanding
the
heights of
commanding heights of the economy. That's from Aneurin Bevan in the
Yes,
Labour
yes.
Party days in Britain.
Yes.
But what they did, where they erred, was, you see, nationalization of itself doesn't translate into forms of socialism, because capitalist governments, in some countries have nationalized.
Yes.
The issue is, the fundamental thing is socialization, right? So we need other forms of ownership. And you can have the tri-sectorial economy with the role for the state. I believe in an active state intervention and state-driven policies for economic development.
No, but what Craig is saying, that the government's role is not in the economic sector. Am I right in saying
I
that?
disagree.
They should do as best as
They should be a
as
facilitator
best
as opposed to a
possible,
front player.
regulate and encourage and promote private
Yes.
sector investment.
Rather than being a direct player.
Yes, they can provide economic services, right? Health and education services that are not provided in adequate enough quantities, but they should purely be regulatory and involved in the creation of new markets.
No, but I believe that healthcare, there are countries where the state strategic sectors of the economy, it happened If you look at a country like, regardless of what you want to say about people like Saddam Hussein, the negative thing, even Oprah Winfrey had to admit, she said, really, she didn't know. Iraq built a very powerful economy before the war started with Iran. They had a very powerful economy. Education was free, medical care, everything and all of this. Libya achieved it. Now, healthcare and education are not commodities that should be regulated and left to market forces. These are human rights, concrete human rights, and you cannot leave them to the market. And that's the role of the state. That's the role of the state.
Let me ask you, Craig, do you believe that there should be things like health levies and so on? Because to supplement, to augment, and to earmark funds for particular areas of social
So who
need.
will be paying the health levies?
Well, the business community, and it's a form of taxation.
You know, Chris, one of the things I would recommend to both Gerald and maybe yourself is to pursue an examination of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that both of you are aware that Canada provides health services.
Mm-hmm.
Yet Canada is also an economy that is driven by just basically the private sector and capitalism and investment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How is it that Canada has actually been able to achieve this, where some of the most expensive health services are delivered free of cost?
Because of higher taxes, partner.
Precisely because of higher taxes.
So would you advocate? Okay.
Not only higher taxes, not only higher taxes.
No, would you advocate higher taxes in this country?
Not higher taxes.
Would you advocate higher taxes?
Not higher taxes.
I'm asking you a direct question. Would you advocate higher taxes?
I'm not advocating higher
would not.
taxes.
So
But
who's going to pay it?
What I'm talking about is the level of incomes that the Canadians have reached that affords the level that affords the income in the form of taxation, which allows the government to fund this kind of service, right? So it's really the private sector which has itself generated the level of wealth within the private sector, including households, to the extent that these people can afford their homes, right? They can afford their cars. The only thing that they don't pay for is the health services which government provides. And this is because I imagine that Canada sees it as a basic right. So Canada, as a model, right, really presents the perfect of where we should be headed as it relates to economic management.
How do we get there?
Precisely.
No. Here,
Chris,
you can't talk in a vacuum.
I'm not.
I'm asking you what policies you would pursue in Guyana.
It is pretty straightforward.
No, what?
Chris,
What?
Chris, the policy we are advocating is one where we encourage private sector investment, private sector growth.
Who is discouraging them now?
Who is discouraging them now, Chris? It has been pretty obvious, Chris, that the private sector, right, under the PPP, right, investment was stronger.
PPP is 4 years ago. Let's
well,
move
right
to the
now,
present.
well, right as of right now, what we have, Chris, you're aware, we have a situation that is highly and very politically unstable, right?
When you say right now, you mean
As
now, as in the past 4 months, or
Well,
now
yes.
since 2015?
Well, yes, right. And
Because you have Go Invest.
Been around for
That's been
But
there.
what-
Let me finish
Uh-huh.
that. That's been there, that goes out there and actively promotes investment.
you see, what we have
You
not
have a
done,
tax
Chris,
system, you have an investment
Chris,
act.
what the government has not done is actually engage in enough of an assessment of where we can earn our revenues. The government has not done enough of an assessment of where our productive allocation resources are and what is the potential of these productive resources. Let us go back to agriculture. We know that there is a slew of land, agricultural land and resources that is slack and unemployed. If those resources are put on
Who owns that land?
Huh?
Who owns the land?
Well, this is up for question. I am not aware of the statistics. But what I do know is that some of it is owned by the private sector. And a lot of it probably that is owned by the private sector is right now probably not in use. And that's what I'm saying. My message is that our policy is to engage in a revitalization of agriculture in the economy. So, and to the extent that we can actually start exporting our produce it goes back to the ideas that we know so much before under Burnham's time, where we can feed, clothe, and house ourselves and still become the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Now, these are old and regurgitated ideas, but I have to accept that they were before me, right? The point is, we can rely on agriculture. Agriculture can fund us, right? It can fund energy, right? And energy, with the cheap energy, we would be able to encourage.
How is agriculture going to fund this cheap energy?
No. The idea is through exports. We get our produce from agriculture, and we export our produce, just as how America is doing it.
But that's what we're doing now.
No, the point is, but the point is, we're not doing it in. The point is, Chris, let me get it to you, Chris. We have a lot of slack resources, agricultural resources. We have a lot of slack.
But as you said,
financial resources. We have a lot of slack industry.
No,
and what I'm saying is that those slack resources are the cause.
Slack resources controlled by whom? The banking
Correct.
system is controlled by whom? Let's be serious.
Yeah.
Who controls the banking system?
Yes.
The government?
Who controls the banking system?
The government?
This is not about controlling. This is about.
Yeah, it is.
This is
But
about.
what
no,
else is it?
You can't.
Chris. This is about the environment, right? The environment for businesses to invest. And
I make no apologies for it. The bank, I'll say it. The banks are the biggest among the biggest criminals you have.
That's not true. No, I won't have you say
I'll
that.
say that.
That's unacceptable.
I'll say that.
They're
I'll say
criminals
that.
in what sense?
I'll say that.
No,
have a lot of money.
that's a grossly irresponsible.
Well, no,
No.
think,
It's
no.
grossly criminal mean you're committing a crime. And
Well,
that's not
well,
right. That's me. That's
crime can be defined. I think
No,
that
it's irresponsible.
I
It
don't-
is irresponsible.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I didn't identify any particular
No,
bank.
it does
I
not
just
matter. It
crossed the
does not
board.
matter. Such reckless statement. That is even worse.
I don't. I think the
that's
average man in the street would agree with me.
No. But that's irresponsible.
No, I think so.
To believe.
I think so.
Now we are talking about the private sector.
Yeah.
It's lending money. What makes it criminal to lend money? The fact is, and I thought, Craig, you would be concerned that the banking system has all of this money, and the money is not being released to the private sector.
No.
To borrowers.
Don't say that. The money is available. But the point is, Chris, are businesses willing to take the risk of investing in the economy or investing in Guyana the way our economy is going right now?
No, but
And
you're
this is
saying this is what we need. Now I said, well, have it, and now you're saying businesses are not, and you mean the private sector is not prepared to take risk. But shouldn't the private sector be taking risk? Isn't that what business is about?
Yes, but they are calculated risks, right? And right now, I have no problem with the private sector holding on to their money, and they will be holding on to their money for quite some time.
So you're saying that the private sector should not be investing?
It's up to them to make that decision.
No. But you're a political leader.
I'm telling you that my explanation to you is that what we have right now is an unstable political environment, right?
No, but we haven't always had this. We
haven't, but this kind of situation, this kind of political situation is not.
Do you believe in a
is
state
not
bank?
investor
Do you
friendly.
believe in a state bank?
I do.
A state bank can be helpful. But a state bank should not crowd out the activities of the private financial system.
Well, if you believe in a state
So they
bank,
give low rates.
what went wrong? Because we had state banks before. We had the Guyana National
Guy
Cooperative Bank.
Is it Guy
And-
Bank?
Mortgage
no,
Finance
Oh,
Bank
Then we had the
Agri.
Mortgage Finance.
and the
We had
Agricultural.
the Agricultural Development
Development
Bank. So what went wrong? How would those things
Chris,
make it different?
Chris,
And you were saying, let's remember,
Uh-huh.
we're saying no, we want the private sector to be doing these things.
Yeah.
Now you're suggesting that the government should go in to compete with the private sector.
No,
Is that
I'm
what
not
you're suggesting?
suggesting. You asked about the relevance of a state bank, and I
Yeah.
said that is possible.
But that would- but the
I did
implication
add-
is
what
competition,
What I
isn't it?
did say is that it should not crowd out the activities of the private financial system, right? You can have a government getting involved to some extent in.
So you accept that? You accept the government can compete with the private sector?
Limited, only to support.
Well, let me give you
only to
another
support-
example. Let me give you another example.
Those areas, so it should be something like IPID. Those areas which the financial system would not generally serve, that would be the areas that the government can support.
So if the private sector could get money out of it, then the government will stay out. But
not the must stay out. Not the must stay out.
But let me give you another example.
If the private sector
Let me
can
give you
serve
another
the area,
example.
yeah.
Let me give you another example. Air access to hinterland communities. Should the government be engaged in providing air access to hinterland communities?
Well, this is something really that the market has to answer.
No,
right?
the market doesn't answer what the government does,
You know,
big
well,
man.
Chris.
let me put it to you this way.
Listen.
If the private sector is providing the service, right, why should the government get involved?
You know,
Well, banking, then why should the government get involved in banking?
No, well, you see,
We have-
Chris,
we have this
we were actually doing is trying to hold me down on a point of
we have
on the
this
point of
double
government involvement.
standards,
And
right?
I think my policies are pretty
The
clear.
private sector like to tell people, they like to say that the government or the government, right, or be more specific, they say the state should stay out of economic activities or what have you. But you look at the United States and countries, right? In the United States, for example, when they had the financial collapse and those banks and all of that with the CEOs that plundered their own businesses, who had to bail them out? When the private sector, when all of them ran into trouble, who bailed them out? Did the private sector went in and bailed out others? It was the state that had to intervene. Look at the Great Depression, the so-called Great Depression the United States had, right? When FDR Franklin Delano Roosevelt set up all sorts of quasi-state institutions that pulled them out. And when he was doing that and creating jobs and all of that, right? Big business in America labeled Roosevelt, said he was a communist for state intervention. Now getting back to the banks, you said that it's irresponsible criminal. Maybe it's a strong word, but listen. A person purchases a house, for example. They pay the bank, right? Then circumstances change. After so many years, despite all the money that they've repaid the bank and all that, the interest and everything, the bank comes in, takes over the property, right, and then sells it to get back with their own, not taking into account what the people have paid over the years.
That's not true. No, you're being irresponsible. That is not correct, Gerald. That is not correct.
They don't.
That is not correct.
They don't.
They don't.
They are except I know what I'm talking about.
So do I.
Okay.
I want to get to the point that Gerald raised just now, because you're saying you believe in the free market. You know.
The bank's got to be dealt with.
Hold on. You know that when the issues happened, Gerald was talking about in the US, the
the financial
mortgage
collapse,
crisis and all of that,
Yeah.
all the big ones. Would you say let the market prevail, let them go under?
No, well, you see, the government, America did the correct thing. They analyzed the situation, and they understood the consequences of having these companies go under, right? That it would have been a much more severe financial hit had those companies gone under completely. So the support.
So there's another function of government that you would see to bail out the private sector.
Well, what actually happened there was, I think, government allowed these kinds of activities to go on, right? Had there been stricter regulation here, government plays a regulatory role, right? The kinds of activities which led to the collapse, the kinds of activities which led to the collapse of these institutions would not have probably occurred.
But do
right?
you know?
There are regulations which seek to prevent insider trading.
Yes.
Well, it is regulations like these I'm speaking about, which
just insider trading. But you recognize that when these businesses are operating, they say, look, we want market forces. Let us do what the private sector says should be done.
Right.
But when the crunch comes, you call on the government.
Yeah,
and then you know who pays the money for that?
The taxpayers.
Yes, the taxpayers.
Yeah,
that's why America can't have a health care system, because they're taking from one and give.
Chris, you see,
one of the
you see, one of the things that countries and the world has actually done is learned from experience, right? The European economies are better for their experience. America is better for its experience.
My friend, it's cyclical.
It
It's
is.
cyclical.
It is cyclical.
You know the crash of the crash of the tortoise.
The so-called
You know the crash of the tortoise.
the cyclical issue of economies is becoming less and less of an issue. I think Australia was one of the countries that generated 25 years of economic growth consistently without going into a recession. It's all about prudent management, prudent policy
I'm
management.
not sure.
Gauging,
Don't forget.
They
Don't
have not
forget,
had
Chris.
25 years.
Don't forget. You know the
Australia, check
you
it.
know the new
Check
term, banksters.
check it. The issue,
Banksters.
the crucial issue with managing an economy is ensuring that it does not exceed certain levels of economic activity, which can, and even if it does, ensuring that the policies that are adopted to rectify or to slow it down are not left too long to actually push the economy into a recession. So there is need for a key understanding of the economic or the how the economy works, right? And how much to give and take as it relates to inducing or reducing investment. And that is key to trending the economy.
I still
And
find you. I still find you.
That's
your
abstract.
concept-
it's not abstract.
It's abstract letter.
No, I still find it
There's nothing-
interesting that the private sector must
Yeah.
run the businesses however they wish, pay whatever wages they want to
Yeah.
pay.
It's not how whatever they want to pay.
And when they run into problems, they go into bankruptcy.
Mhm.
They go and start back again,
Mhm.
and the government carries the can.
Correct.
That's
Yeah.
what happens, partner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
I just want to say this quickly. Right here in the run up to the
You got
elections.
7 minutes. You
yeah, yeah.
can talk.
When the APNU AFC government said, youths, we are going to create jobs for you. I sat right here in one of our ads and I said, they cannot create jobs for the youth because they're not, the policies they're running with does not allow them to pursue that part. Then we brought out a special fly with that, what they said earlier and then after. And then in less than a year, Mr. Granger said that
But
there is no magic one,
Gerald,
right? That we cannot. But
Gerald.
we knew it. How did we know? Because we understand the political economy of neoliberal capitalism. We understand the political economy of it.
we did need a change in 2015, though. Eh?
But
It has nothing to do with
he was batting. He openly batted for them.
we did need a change. In
We
the government.
practically supported.
We did.
But you openly batted for them, and then
We
you
need
were
a way
disappointed.
forward. Gerald, we need a way forward.
So have we
Don't
got- have we
defend the
got-
1%.
Have we got that way forward?
I have the
The 99% is who creates the wealth.
I'm proposing a pilot program for the way forward.
What kind of pilot program? Let me hear it.
You guys got it already. It's on the news. It's on the internet.
No, tell me now. Tell the people.
Yeah, it's straight. It's pretty straightforward, you know. Right? We engage.
We tell the people.
We
We want to take
Hold
out.
on,
the-
let you go.
We engage.
You get plenty time, but that's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We engage.
Yeah, good.
It's very simple, right? We engage the economy in its entirety, right? We work with the private sector, all economic sectors, right, to boost.
What would you know about foreign capital?
You're cutting me up here, man. Let me finish off.
No, I asked
It's
you.
an important question. I would raid foreign capital in.
Foreign capital-
They're rooting plunder in this
foreign
country.
capital is good and bad. It just needs to be properly managed as it relates.
How do you
to-
manage foreign capital?
Yeah, well, ensuring that the foreign investors don't plunder our resources
Take this,
by Shan Land.
take this oil contract with
You cut
Yes,
me
sir.
off. You cut me off selling my.
No, 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 he's-
No, this is not here. You're not here to sell party partner.
No, you asked me about my policy.
No.
I'm not
No,
even
no.
about my pilot
No,
program.
I'm asking you. You've heard a lot about this oil contracts and so on.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of that kind of contract?
So
Are you in
obviously,
favor of?
Chris, we haven't had much of a chat on it, but I know as well as you know that contract needs to be put in the bin and it needs to start again. Right? You know of
You
the zero.
said that as
You
a-
know of the zero that created.
It should not have been signed in
you
the
know of
first
zero
place.
that is not a zero, right? That same zero that made 6,600. That is the zero that should make that contract go out the door. But seriously, it really needs to be renegotiated. It needs to be revisited, and I'm sure that Exxon will understand that when they meet international consultants on the opposite side, they will have respect for them and what we are asking for.
But your government is not doing it. Your government is not asking.
This is not my government anymore.
No, it's our government. It's our. We're still a democracy partner. Whether you vote for somebody or not,
Yeah.
the government is the government of the day.
Yeah.
And that's what patriotism is about too.
The point is, this government has been really unrepresented and has misrepresented its people on both sides of the aisle. It has done a disservice to its own supporters, and it is. Chris, let's not get into what we know.
All political parties that are bourgeois in their orientation will always misrepresent and treat the people are only there. They only need the people for the votes.
And there is a way forward, and that way forward will be defined by us.
But you guys.
None of them are working class.
That includes you too, huh?
I did this guy. We talked about politics and so on. But if the people are as intelligent as you're saying they are, why aren't the people supporting you in any significant number? They're still supporting the bad fellows.
Well, this is a struggle. This is a struggle. It'll take time. It'll get there. It'll get there. Because look.
Thank you, Gerald.
It'll get there because, listen, at the end of the day, they will see. They will get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Because the only OVP, our philosophy is simple. We want to take the...
We're going to get in the long run. You know
people, we will get there.
What Keynes said about the long run? We said with Lord Keynes, we said...
Oh, yeah.
In the long run, we are dead.
Yes, correct.
So when are we going to get here?
We will get, the struggle continues. The struggle continues.
I still keep asking.
You know, there were those who said, there were people who believed that every existing social order, it's permanent. It doesn't change. They believe that there were those who argued that slavery won't come to an end. And it did come to an end.
Put our minds and our heads together.
They enslaved and captured Africans, ended it.
Yeah, but listen.
The future we want, we can have. We have to go there and get it.
You know, the Russian Revolution was supposed to be this great event in world history. Look how it collapsed. The whole Soviet system collapsed.
When you study,
well, there's many reasons. There's another discussion we'll get in, but nobody can deny the achievements that they made. But it had to collapse because, you know, it's something deeper. There's a spiritual dimension to all civilizations, and when you're talking about social change and social transformation, if you don't understand, if you run with an ideology that doesn't acknowledge the spiritual dimension of man, and you only reduce man to economic being, homo economicus, as an economic being, you must collapse.
So you're gone into the relapse track now.
No, I'm just saying this because people have more than material needs. People have needs, other needs that must be addressed.
The fact is,
that's all I'm saying.
We have to ask ourselves, how much better off now we are than we were then? What caused either the being the better off or the worse off? Why are we not even better off? And that's the kind of analysis we need. And to me, it's the kind of thing we got to talk at the people level.
Yeah.
We talking on television and doing anything.
No. Well, at the end,
what we have done is basically examine some ideas that contributed to where we are. Right?
Chris,
and a lot of it
at the end of the day,
the politics and policies of the parties.
Listen to this. We cannot act. This is one of the things I always try to make clear. We cannot be substitutes for the self-conscious activity. The people themselves have to become the conscious agents of change. Once you leave it to the politicians, once you get your right, you give it away to the politicians.
You're a politician.
Here, I don't like the term applied to me. That's another thing.
Man, you talking about
I'm a political activist. I don't like politician. The politician is the professional liar who manipulate public opinion and the people for power.
We got it.
Right? We're about empowering the people, genuinely empowering the people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's been a good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. It's always a pleasure to be and to give us the opportunity, you know.
Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. See you next week.